So when I was born, some of you know the story, but when I was born, my parents married early in life, back in those days. And so they had 3 boys right away. And then after the last boy, they waited 16 years before another one came along. And this was the days really before you could really find out what you were having, boy or girl. And the doctor told our family doctor told my mom, hey, this is it. You've got the girl. They measured the heart rate. They're like, you're finally getting your girl. My mom was all excited. And so in preparation, after all these years, I mean, their youngest at this point was a sophomore in high school, 16 years old. And they're doing this all over again. Can you imagine? She was 42 years old. And back in those days, this was unheard of. And so they're getting ready to have the baby. They're preparing. They pick the name out. Good to go. And go into the hospital. And a little baby boy is born. Me. And in case you're wondering. And so I come out. And the doctor... Literally, I thought they were joking, but this story is true. He was so afraid to tell my mom that it was a boy, he wouldn't do it. He went to my dad, he goes, you got to tell her. I'm not telling her. There's no way I'm going in that room. And the story goes, my dad walked in, and he says, hey, congratulations, you've had a son. And she's like, yeah, haha, yeah, very funny. And he's like, no, really, you had a boy. And she didn't believe it for a while. So the first day goes by, and there's no name for me. I was just a little baby boy, I guess. Second day, no name. This was back when you stayed in the hospital a bit. Third day, no name. Fourth day is leaving day, and they go, you're not leaving the hospital until you name this boy. He's got to have a name. Well, my brothers all had biblical names. My oldest brother's name is Philip, and then the next brother's name is Daniel, and then Paul. So... kind of had a little thing going. Maybe you've got that in your family, like some kind of pattern or something. And so, I don't know. I guess they were just desperate. And so they picked Jeff. Not in the Bible, by the way. There's no Jeff in the Bible. And so, just name me Jeff. My name, by the way, you can find out the popularity of your name. I don't know if you've done this. My name peaked in popularity in 1975. But I'm coming back. Jeff is coming back. I can feel it. And so then I started to grow up, became a little boy, and I noticed when I was a little older that in my little boyhood books that my dad and my mom would read me, my dad was big on putting his name on the inside cover of all the books he owned. And so he put my name in there, but he spelled it differently than what was on my birth certificate. So I was born Jeff. Some of you know that. But he spelled it Geoff. And as I got older, I'm like, what's up with that? And what I learned was he really wished he'd spelled it differently. He didn't wish he gave me a biblical name, I guess, but he wished he'd spelled it differently. And he really considered changing it all the way up until I went into school. But once I got into kindergarten, he's like, I'm not going to do that. And so he never did. And I don't know how much you know about your name. I don't know if you like your name. Some of you maybe don't like your name. Some of you maybe have a real common name or a unique name. But today what we're talking about is names. And names are a big deal in the Bible. They really make a statement about something. And if you don't know what your name means, you should look up and know what your name means. I love asking that question to people and finding out a little bit about them and about their name. And usually there's some connection with their character or their life or something about them that matches the name that they have. And today, as we wrap up this series, we're going to be talking about how God says to his people, he's giving them this new name. So we're in week 6. We're at the end of the world. Okay, you ready for that? So this is it. So our growth guides for this year ended this week, and we read about the judgment, about the end. And I'll mention that here before we close. But we've been looking at this last book of the Bible and what it has to say And what Jesus is saying to these 7 churches about what's coming and where they've been and what's ahead. And we've talked about some of the different things that have been revealed in this mysterious last book of the Bible. And before we get there real quick, I want to report to you that last week at our Explorers Camp, I believe the number was 17. And then during Daybreak Live last week, we had someone with us on Daybreak Live. And so we had 18 people receive Jesus Christ as their Savior within the last few days here at Daybreak. Make that volume a little bit higher. Okay, that's good. That's good. No golf claps for people following Jesus. We really got to get into it, all right? And that's exciting to think about new life that happened here at Daybreak. And so we've got a lot of people with us on Daybreak Live. And let's give them a little bit more than a golf clap. Let's welcome our people on Daybreak Live here today. Can we do that? Hi, everybody. All right. Good. You're waking up a little bit. It's summer. It's barbecue day. You ready for this? All right. And so speaking of summer real quick, I just want to reiterate the slip and slide. This is an event that will be thousands and thousands of people from our community will be there. And this is our opportunity, Daybreak, to get involved. And I just want to say one more time, I hope that you sign up to volunteer. We need a lot more volunteers. This is a big event, and it's happening in our community coming up on August 12th. So consider that. If you don't have anything going, or if you do, cancel it and be there. We need help because there will be all these families that will be there. And what an opportunity for us as a church to just show the love of Christ in a really, really fun event. You know, someone asked me this summer, what was your favorite thing about being at NTS camp? And we just finished up our last camp on Friday in Iowa. I just want to thank you for your prayers and all the messages and encouragement. It's been an incredible summer. They asked me what's my favorite, and I'll tell you what my favorite thing is, and it changes during different seasons, but after doing this for so long, my favorite thing was watching kids have fun. Watching them outside, laughing, playing, and just being together. And that may sound maybe odd to you in light of the fact of all the spiritual changes that God is bringing and all the commitments and all these amazing things that happen. But I'll tell you, there's nothing like seeing that. And this slip and slide event will be an opportunity for us to just watch kids be kids. And in our world today, that's a really important thing. So I hope you get behind that and get involved in what we're doing. So as we wrap up this series, let me just tell you about where we're going over the next few weeks. That we've got a series where I'm bringing in some incredible communicators here at Daybreak. And we're doing this series. And all I asked for these communicators, I said, I want you to bring me your best. So we're doing this series in August called Mixtape. And it's going to be all these different guests from week to week. And you're going to see a lineup here on the screen of just all the people that we're bringing in. Next week, a really good friend of mine from the Chicago area, Miguel de la Mora, is going to share with us. And then the week after will be Olivia Williamson. Some of you know her. She changed her last name when she got married. I don't know why. Her name used to be Olivia Eckert. You might recognize that last name. And then Dr. Jim Lowe, a really good dear friend of mine who's a professor at Indiana Wesleyan University, is going to share. An amazing man who's traveled the world, has a lot to share for us as well. And then after that, he's in the house here. Mr. Riley Olson is going to be sharing with us. Can't wait for that. Highlighting our students. Riley's ready to bring it. And then Rachel Regard, one of our children's pastors here, is speaking to wrap up our series. And I can't wait, and she's going to bring it as well. This is going to be her first time on the stage. So it's going to be an incredible month that we've got ahead. So that's a little bit about where we're going. Let's get to today. So this is about 7 churches. These words, we're going to look at the last couple, but let me just give you a picture here. This is where these 7 churches were and are today. These are real places, and these are real words given to real people, and it's amazing how relevant it is for us today. And just a quick recap. I want to go through the 7 churches, going back here for a minute, and starting with church number 1 was the church of Ephesus, and Riley kicked us off and did a great job talking about the loveless church. And then the next week we looked at church number 2, and that's the church of Smyrna. This was the persecuted church, and how do we overcome and remember that God's being faithful to us. Third church, Pergamum. And this is the church that was the compromising church. And if you were here, Troy Evans brought it to us as a special guest, talking about how we don't compromise. And the next week was Thyatira, and how we resist the enemy. And Danielle Freed spoke to us and did a wonderful job talking about that. And then church number 5 was last week. That was the dead church and the things around us that are dead or dying, and how do we allow God to resurrect that. Today we're going to talk about the 6th church, which is the church of Philadelphia. We'll get back to that. This is the loving church. But then the last church, I'm just going to mention, we're not going to read it, but it's an interesting story. I would encourage you to go back in Revelation 3, but it's the church of Laodicea. And they're known as the lukewarm church. Jesus says to the church in Laodicea, I wish you were hot or cold. Don't be in the middle. And that is a reminder for us that we need to be all in on what we believe in our faith, that there's no room for compromise. So today, the church in Philadelphia, Revelation 3, it says this. To the angel of the church in Philadelphia, write, these are the words of him who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but remember that, the key of David, what that is. And what he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. I know your deeds. See, I placed before you an open door that no one can shut. I know you have little strength, yet you have kept my word and you have not denied my name. I will make those who are the synagogue of Satan, who claim to be Jews, though they are not, they are liars. I will make them come and fall at your feet and acknowledge that I have loved you. Since you have kept my command to endure patiently, I will also keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come on the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth. I am coming soon. Hold on to what you have, so no one will take your crown. The one who is victorious, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never again will they leave it. I will write the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from my God. And I will also write on them my new name. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches. There's a lot here, and we don't have time to get to all of it, but there's 2 really important things happening in this message to the church. One is that God opens doors. There's a really strong statement there that Jesus gives to this church in saying, when I open doors, no one can shut them. And when I open and close a door, I am doing something that is in my power and in my authority. Now, if you notice there, it says that to him who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. And the key of David, when something's mentioned in the Bible one place, and if it's mentioned another place, especially if it's a long time in between, there can be a significance to that. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years before this was given to the church of Philadelphia, there was another key of David, and it's mentioned in Isaiah 22. In Isaiah 22, it talks about the key of David, and look at what it says there. I will place on his shoulder the key to the house of David, and look if this sounds familiar. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. So here, the prophecy is about towards this man named Shebna. Now, Shebna, you don't really need to know much about him, other than that God's message here is Shebna was full of pride. And Shebna, what he had done is he had built up his life and had all these possessions and all this authority, and he rested on all of that, thinking that was all he needed. And God has a very strong message to him, and he says, I'm taking away your authority, and I'm giving this key, what we just read, to another person, Eliakim. You don't really need to know much about him other than this. He was a humble servant. And God's statement against Shebna was, you're proud And so I'm taking away this authority that you have, and I'm giving it to someone else who can handle it with humility. Now, this also references this passage in Isaiah. It foreshadows the coming of Jesus into the world. Jesus, the humble leader, the humble servant. In Philippians 2, we see these words about Jesus. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. He is our prototype. Jesus is our example to live by. And it says here that he lived in humility. Consider others better than yourselves. Proverbs 3 talks about pride when it says he, God, mocks proud mockers, but shows favor to the humble and oppressed. And James later in the Bible quotes this and says, God opposes the proud. You don't find this very often when it says God literally opposes someone. That there's something about pride that God opposes. So if there's pride in your life, you need to understand, if you think you got it going and you don't have any need for God, if you don't need him, boy, if you haven't realized already, life can change so fast. And if you have a humility, you know your need for God. How do you know if there's pride in your life? Well, there's some ways to recognize it. Here's a couple things. One is if you have a sense of superiority over others. And maybe you're around people like this, and it just seems like their conversation, even their body language, they just have this sense of being better than everybody else. You know you're proud if you have an expectation of entitlement. You know that you're proud if you have an unwillingness to be corrected. If you don't have a teachable spirit, if no one feels like they can approach you, and by the way, if no one feels like they can approach you, guess what? You won't be approached by anyone saying, hey, have you ever thought about this in your life? You've got an issue here. Pride is one of the most dangerous and destructive things. Sometimes, though, I wonder if a little bit of pride is good. You know, last night, I was telling a couple guys I was praying with this morning, I was driving back with Ariana to our house, and we saw 4 or 5 girls come out of their house in our neighborhood, and they were all wearing pink, and they were all getting in the car. Take a guess where they were going. Does anybody know where they were going? Some of you are like, what? And Ariana looked at him, I was like, oh, it's a bunch of girls in pink. She goes, oh, they're all going to the Barbie movie. Would you go to the Barbie movie? She asked me. And I looked at her and I was like, there is no way I'm going to the Barbie movie. I won't be seen in public watching that movie. I'll watch it at home in private later. There's a little bit of pride in there, you know what I mean? You know, pride, it can be such a dangerous thing. And let me just encourage you that when God opens a door for you, I just believe that that open door is always connected to a humble spirit. You know, there's something here that Jesus says that is so powerful. He says, if I open a door, no one can shut that door. If God opens a door for you, and I don't know if you've ever been in life and you've tried to get through a closed door and it's difficult. And if you've ever in your life you've tried to get an opportunity, you've tried to get a breakthrough, you've tried this and you've tried that, and nothing seems to be working. And last summer, we became the owners of an RV. And what someone told me is with an RV, there's always something that needs to be fixed. Just imagine taking your house and putting it on wheels and then driving over a few earthquakes. That's what it's like in an RV. So there's always something, but we love having it. But last summer, we just gotten this thing. It's a 2020. It was pretty new. It only had a few thousand miles on it. But we noticed as we were out traveling at one of our camps that the only door to get in and out of this RV stopped working. So this is what happened as a result. You're going to see what we had to do. And let's just watch it one more time there. Yeah. Yeah, the Beverly Hillbillies, there they are in their RV pulling up. The camp directors. We couldn't get in this RV, and we were staying out there for hours. We had a dog inside barking like, "What are you doing? Get in here." And so we figured, well, we'll just open the window and climb in really smooth, like, you know. You know, sometimes doors are closed. Man, sometimes doors are open. I remember back in 2017, began to have a conversation with a certain ministry, a national ministry, and they said, "Hey, we'd like to consider this position." And I shared it with a few friends, and I thought, I wonder if I should do this. And I don't really think much about doing other things. I'm pretty focused on what I do. But this one was near and dear to my heart, and it caught my attention, and it wouldn't allow me to really change a lot in my life. And I had some friends speak into me and say, "Hey, you know, speak into the insecurity," like, because I was thinking, I don't know if I can do this. I mean, this is a big job, and it's, you know, very visible. And they said, "No, you should really do this." And I began to think and listen to what these other friends were saying. And then I felt just in my head the Lord really speak to me. And he gave me a picture. And the picture is God just, it wasn't audible, but boy, it felt close. The voice of God. And it was like, he gave me this picture of an open door. And he said, "I've opened the door, but you have to walk through it. I'm not going to force you. I'm not going to push you through that open door, but that door is open." It was almost like I was here, and there's people I was with, people I was comfortable with, things I was used to, familiarity, comfort, safety, all those things here in this room. But in that room, it was almost like as I thought about this vision, it was like I looked through that doorway and I thought, well, what's over there? And as my mind just to kind of begin to extrapolate and think about what this meant, it was like, it's almost like I was at my, you know, own little party that I was used to having. But there's another party over there. The other party, there was music and there was other people, and I kind of glanced through. And I thought about what it would mean to walk through that door that God opened into this other place. God changed me in that moment, because what I realized is when God opens a door, it's up to me whether or not I want to have the faith to step over the threshold into this new reality that God wants to bring me to. Let me say this to you. When God opens a door for you, that means you have to leave behind safety, security, sometimes relationships, sometimes things that are comfortable. But you don't realize those relationships, that safety, that comfort, that's keeping you from going to another level in your relationship with God and your influence in your life. So let me just encourage you, if God opens a door, if you've tried and you've banged that door and you've tried everything to get through and all of a sudden it opens, let me just tell you, it's not easy. But walking through that door makes a big difference. He also makes another statement. He says, "I'm going to give you a new name." So God gives his people this new name that they are to be known by. He says, I'm bringing you this name. Now, the city of Philadelphia, we know we have a city of Philadelphia in the United States. It's the city of brotherly love. Probably a lot of you know that. This city actually renamed itself. It had a catastrophe and it had to completely rebuild, and it was during the Roman Empire, and so Caesar gave them all these resources to do it. And so for a while they were known as Neo Caesarea, which means New Caesarea. It was a tribute to the emperor. But after a while, you know what happened was people were like, "Hey, we're Neo Caesarea," and they're like, "Oh, you mean Philadelphia?" And so they eventually just went back to that name. And here Jesus is saying, I'm going to give you a new name. In the Bible, there's different references to names being used in different ways. One of the ways that names are given is through the idea of a promise. Abram and Sarai were given new names when they were promised in their old age that they were going to have a son, which was physically impossible. And God renamed them. He blended his name, and we actually sang it in a song, Yahweh, Abram with Abraham, and Sarai with Sarah. The name Yahweh he inserted as he made this covenant promise agreement with them. He also does this with Jacob. This name was almost like a new psyche for Jacob, because when Jacob was born, his name was kind of a Hebrew variant of this idea that he is a deceiver. It's where we get this phrase, you're pulling my leg. It's kind of, you're kidding with me, you're not being honest, you're not being real. And Jacob, boy, he lived out that name. He was a deceiving person that was always using deception to get ahead. And God renamed him Israel, from which the nation of Israel is derived, and it means one who prevails with God. He was no longer living in his past, but in his future. There's also times when God uses names for protection. Hadassah, who went by her Persian name that you might be more familiar with in the Bible, Esther. She went by her Persian name to conceal her identity out of fear for persecution. There's also Daniel, whose name was changed to Belteshazzar, a Babylonian name, in order to honor false gods. And yet Daniel, in this renaming out of persecution, remained faithful to his God, even though he was literally renamed by someone else who didn't hold his same faith and values. We see this in Simon, a disciple of Jesus. There was a name given to him that was a name given out of this idea of potential. Simon was a disciple, a follower of Jesus, one of the 12 closest disciples, named apostles. And Jesus looked at him and said, you're no longer Simon, but you're Peter. That's the rock. You know what Jesus was doing there? He was forecasting his future. Simon, you're not very stable now, but you will be. You will be a rock. Saul, sometimes our name changes out of purpose. Saul was a Hebrew, a teacher, a religious leader. And after the death and resurrection of Jesus, he was persecuting Christians. Jesus appeared to him in a vision. We see this in the book of Acts. And then later, Paul is sent to the Roman Empire, to non-Jewish people, the first missionary outside of the Jewish people group to take Christianity, and he went by his Roman name, Paul. It was a designation of a change of purpose in his life. But let me go back to that conversation that Jesus had with Peter. Matthew 16. Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, and he said to the disciples, who do people say that the Son of Man is? They replied, well, some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But what about you, he asked, who do you say I am? And Simon Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And Jesus replied, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you, and this is where it happens, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. And I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Another reference to keys here. And whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loose in heaven. In other words, I'm giving you authority to lock and unlock doors. That's the kind of authority that Jesus there is speaking, not only, I believe, to Peter in that moment, but to us as followers of Jesus as well. If you're a follower of Jesus, God has something for you. He has an identity. He has a calling. And this, to me, speaks so much to the love of God. When God says, I don't see you how you are, I see you how you will be. Peter, you've been this kind of loudmouth, unstable, unpredictable guy, but you are going to be the rock. You are going to lead the church. You are going to lead this following that I've started after I'm gone. When you think about yourself, some of you are just living in the past. You're living with that old name. You're living with that name that means deceiver, that means failure, that means unforgiveness. You're living in that past where all you see is the mistakes you've made, and God is saying, look ahead and look at where I'm taking you and look at who you are becoming. And when you follow Jesus, He's taking you on a journey to change you. That's why He says, I've got a new name for you. If you walk through that door, you receive this new name that I have for you. Now, if you're newer to Daybreak, if you didn't know me pre-Daybreak, I mentioned the spelling of my name that I was given at birth. And throughout my entire life, my dad made it well known to me and our family that he regretted, that he wished he would have spelled my name G-O-F-F instead of J-E-F-F. He even wrote it in his autobiography, that it was a regret. The year 2019 was one of the greatest years of my life. I could tell you story after story of all the things that God did. 2020, not so much. It's a tough year, toughest year of my life. But it was a year of transformation. And some of you know I took a long walk on the trail of death that summer of 2020 from Indiana to Kansas. And as I was doing that, I felt that God was changing me. And through something so deep in my soul, I could never explain it to you, God began to say, you're a new person. I am resurrecting you. You know, the conversation about Daybreak had begun with Wes Dupin, our founding pastor, just before this walk. As I walked those miles out on the road and those trails, that resonated in my heart. God, what do you have for me? What's my future? And some of you know that my very first Sunday, I announced that I was changing what my name was. I don't feel like I did that because it was something that I wanted to do. Let me tell you, when you're an adult and you change your name, it is a hassle. I don't recommend it. But I felt so strongly that God had changed who I was. I'm a different person than I was in 2019. God has a new name for you. You may not go through all the dramatics of changing your name, but God has something new for you. If you're willing to follow Him. Jesus is coming back. I hope you're ready. I hope you're ready to recognize this new reality. God wants to take you from one place into another and to give you a new identity. Would you stand with me? We're going to sing together and then we're going to close. But let's think about what God is saying to us today as we sing together.
Okay, everybody. See how quick they get it? Come on, everybody. Let's celebrate. Here we go.
Well, we finished reading this book, if you're with the Growth Guides, and Jesus here at the very end, he says, "Look, I am coming soon. Blessed is the one who keeps the words of this prophecy written in this scroll." These are words over the last few weeks we've been challenged by, and I want to encourage you to live this out. Jesus could be coming back at any moment, and I really believe that. The signs are everywhere. You know, as we were singing that song and just thinking about today, I can't help but just say, if you've never made a decision to follow Jesus, I just want to close in prayer. And if you want to make that decision today, it's as simply as saying, I confess my need for God. I'm not proud enough to know that I need God in my life. I'm willing to turn away from my past. I believe that Jesus died for me, and I receive him. John 1:12, yet you all have received him. He gave the right to become children of God. If you're with us on Daybreak Live or here in the house, let me just encourage you as we pray to close this time together. Would you pray with me? There was someone on Daybreak Live, and if you're watching and you say, I want to make that decision, let us know in the chat. We want to be there for you. If you're here in the house, love to have you make that decision today. It will change your life. You can leave the past behind. Bow your heads with me. If you're on Daybreak Live and you want to make that decision, let us know. If you're here in the house, just raise your hand and say, I want to pray that prayer today. Love to pray with you. Father, for those that raise their hands today, Lord, we just confess, all of us, our need for you. We turn away from the things that are wrong in our life. We believe, Jesus, that you came to this earth. You showed us how to live, but more importantly, you sacrificed yourself. God, we receive you today. God, may we live by these words. May we receive our new name today. In Jesus' name. Hey, if you raised your hand in the house, come find me when the service is over, or go outside to your right to the lounge. And if you're here in the house, we're going to have some food. So if you didn't plan on it, love to have you hang out. We're going to eat some pig and have some fun, all right? Have a great day.